Hey, Dr. Ray here, founder of the Learning Liaisons, and welcome. Welcome to our Wednesday evening math sessions featuring our math specialist and your math specialist, Amy Sink. In the next hour, Amy has put together a sample set of approximately 10 practice questions that run the gamut from kindergarten levels all the way through 12th grade high school math. Now, I know you are attending here, watching this, and you're like, well, I'm doing elementary in Texas, or I'm doing elementary in Praxis, or I'm doing high school math in Florida, or middle school math in Texas. And what's going on here, right? So we're doing these sessions to help you guys out and provide you with different ways to look at problems and to build that confidence. Because here at the Learning Liaisons, one of our major objectives is to clear up the testing confusion, give you the support you deserve in order to nail your exam and be done with it. So our focus is on math. Now, are we going to be just focusing on high school math the whole hour or elementary? No. We've got a mixture here. Now, Amy's going to go through a bunch of problems. You're going to have the opportunity to download those as a PDF. So when Amy starts, just pay attention to the screen. We're going to have a message there for you so you can download the PDF in case we don't get to all the problems or want to practice on your own. She's going to do her best to go across all different grade levels. If you have a question, you feel free to ask Amy your question as well. We're teachers here too, so we can multitask. Our job is to make sure that we give you what you need to be successful. But if you're like, dang it, I didn't have any questions this week, don't worry. We'll be here next Wednesday night as well. So bring those questions with you if you want, and you can ask Amy away. Because here at the Learning Liaisons, we pride ourselves in providing you guys the support you need to pass your exam. So whether you're our Florida teachers here with our FTCE exams, our national exam Praxis peeps, big shout out to you guys out there too, and especially our newcomers to the Learning Liaisons brand, TExES Prep. So whether you're elementary, middle school, and high school, we've got your back. So sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, get ready to learn some math, and stay tuned for the end because I'm going to jump back on to close this out. And I got a special surprise for you guys who really want to get the real deal prep and get everything you need to be successful and practice, clear up that confusion, and pass your certification exam on the next attempt. So, welcome to the Learning Liaisons community. Always remember, it's when you pass, not if you pass. So without further ado, let's turn it over to the reason why you're here, Amy. You with us, Amy? Let's get going.
Hey everybody, welcome to Wednesday Math Night. I'm so excited that you're joining us today. It is Wednesday, January 19th, and I am here every Wednesday with you, just going over, as Dr. A said, some problems that could be on the exam that you are taking soon. Elementary, pre-K through 3, middle school math, high school math, Praxis, core, GK, we cover it all. Now, like he said, we're only going to get to about 8 to 10 problems tonight. So you always want to join us on every Wednesday so you can get a variety of problems. I do try to make sure that those problems span the variety of pre-K through 12. And when I rabbit trail about the problems and we're really diving into them and explaining them, I also make sure that I try to pinpoint areas that each grade level needs to focus on. So before we get started, I like to know where you are from and what exam you're prepping for, because that helps me kind of guide those rabbit trail conversations. So if you could tell me where you're from and what test you're prepping for in the comment box, that would be awesome. And if you are an NFL football fan, you can tell me who your NFL favorite football team is. We're a Cowboys family in this household, and unfortunately, last weekend was rough. So it was not a good weekend for a Cowboys fan last weekend in the playoffs. But it is what it is. So let's go ahead and get started. I am from Central Florida. I am a math coach in Central Florida. And obviously I'm not prepping for any test, but that's a little bit about me. And we are actually expecting our first child in about 4 weeks. So we're super excited for that. Hey, Vicky from Miami. Awesome. FTCE math and reading. You've got this. Awesome. From Chicago, but living in Florida, pre-K through 3. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our first problem. So let's get started. What is the volume of the figure that would be created from the net shown to the right. So nets are super popular in pre-K through 3K through 6. So just understanding what this net creates is a super popular question, geometry question, being able to visualize what this is going to create. So this is going to create a cylinder. How do I know that? Because a cylinder has a circular base and a circular top, and it looks something like a can of soup. But then if you were to cut that label off that soup and open it up, what kind of shape would we have? We would have a rectangle. So this rectangle is this portion right here. And then obviously the circle on top and circle on bottom are going to fold down to create the circle on top and circle on bottom here for our cylinder. Thank you so much, Vicki. We are very excited. So now I have to know what my volume formula for a cylinder is. Well, a cylinder, I kind of like to think of a cylinder as a circular prism. Kind of weird, I know. But I like to kind of think of a cylinder as a circular prism. Let's look at a rectangular prism or a triangular prism. What do we know about the volume of prisms? The volume formula is area of the base times the height. So we find the area of our base, which we've got 2 of them. Hey, Hope, welcome. We've got the area of my triangle times the height, or the area of this rectangle times the height. Well, in a cylinder, I've got the area of my base, which is going to be a circle, times the height, which is that rectangular height. So it's not written like this. Often when you Google the volume formula for a cylinder, you're going to get volume equals pi r squared h. But pi r squared is the area of a circle, and our circle is right here. So the volume of a cylinder is the same thing as a volume of a prism, because it's just a circular prism. So we need to find the volume of this cylinder, which is volume equals pi r squared h. So what information do I need? I need my r and I need my h. Well, my h is going to be 12, because when I wrap that rectangle around, this is going to be how tall my rectangle is. So this is going to equal my h. And what is this going to represent? This is where it's going to trip people up. What is this length right here going to represent? When we think about wrapping it around, in fact, I've got a cylinder cup right here. So let's go ahead and just visualize this for a minute. If I wrap this piece of paper around my cylinder, this is going to be my height. So that vertical edge of my rectangle is going to be my height. That's the 12. The 22 is this length right here. So if I go like this and I wrap it all the way around, what do I know about that? It's the circumference of my circle. It's going all the way around my circle right here. It's the circumference. So now that I know that that is my circumference, I can now solve for my r. You like to think of it like a Pringle. I love that. So I'm going to now have to solve for my radius. Well, now I'm having to pull in another formula to be able to solve this. So circumference formula is 2 pi r, but I know that my circumference is 22. So 22 equals 2 times pi times r. Pi is just a number, and we're going to actually just leave it as pi because my answer choices all have pi in them. So I'm actually not going to multiply by 3.14 or divide by 3.14 because my answer choices have pi in it. So I'm trying to isolate my r, so I'm going to divide everything by 2 pi. Divide by 2 pi. Well, 22 divided by 2 is 11. So r equals 11 divided by pi. So the radius of this circle is 11 divided by pi. Please don't get intimidated, weirded out, think you did something wrong just because you get an answer that looks like that. It's not always wrong. Sometimes we have not pretty answers. So I'm going to plug that in for my R. I'm going to plug this in for my H and solve for my volume. Volume equals pi times R squared times H. I'm actually going to expand this so I can see it a little better. So pi times 11 divided by pi times 11 divided by pi, because square just means multiply something by itself, times 12. Now what I can do, because this pi is technically over 1, I can cancel this pi with this pi, because pi divided by pi is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So I have 11 times 11 is 121 divided by pi times 12. I'm going to use my calculator to figure that out. 121 times 12. 121 times 12 is 1,452 divided by pi. Again, pi is just a number, so we can actually leave it like that, where A is our answer. Now, don't confuse that with a square root. A square root is a number, but simplified form, we don't leave a square root in the denominator. We can leave pi in the denominator. It's not a big deal. All right, excellent job. Let's go ahead and go on to problem number 2. Well, it's actually problem number 1 because this problem was left over from last week. So this was problem A, and now we're actually going into problem 1. All right, 2 rectangles are drawn in the coordinate plane. The vertices of the first rectangle are as follows. And I'm not going to read these out loud. We don't need to. But these are the vertices of the first rectangle. The vertices of the second rectangle are as follows. Don't need to read those out loud. You guys can read them for yourself. And x comma y. Find the value of x and y that allow these 2 rectangles to be congruent. What we need to know first in this problem is the difference between congruent and similar. Congruent means they are exactly the same shape, equal in size and shape. Similar means that they are different sizes, but they are proportionally the same. We talked about this last week too. And if you missed my explanation on the difference between congruent and similar, I encourage you to go back and watch last week's video, because I did like a whole 5-minute explanation about the difference between congruent and similar. So we've got congruent and we've got similar. In this case, we want the rectangles to be congruent, which means everything about them needs to be equal. So let's go ahead and graph them on a coordinate plane. Some of you are better than I am at this, and you could probably visualize this. I do not recommend you visualizing this if that's not your strength. Not my strength at all. So I always will do a quick sketch when I'm working with geometry like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -4, comma 1. Now, this may not be a question that my pre-K through 3 or K through 6 people see. However, you need to know what a rectangle is, and you definitely need to know how to plot points on a graph. So while I'm plotting these points, start to think about, do you understand how to plot points? If you don't, you need to watch. So -4, comma 1. -4 is the x. 1 is the y value. X always comes before y. And the x-axis is here, the y-axis is here. So I'm going to go negative to the left, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go positive 1 in the y direction. So negative 4 comma 1 is here. Negative 1 comma 1. Negative 1, negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 4, negative 4. And I have a rectangle that looks like this. Now, before I draw my next rectangle, I'm going to see what is the distance or the length of each side. That way I can determine what the other point is going to be. So I see between this point and this point, I have a distance of 1, 2, 3. So the length of that side is 3. For the vertical piece, I have a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're not confident in your ability to draw accurately, you can also look at your X and your Y values and just figure out what the gap is between them. The gap between negative 1 and negative 4 on a number line is 3. The gap between 1 and negative 4 on a number line is 5. So I can also do it mathematically without graphing it as well. Now I'm going to graph my next rectangle. 1, 2, 6, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 5, over 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and X, Y. So far, here's my rectangle. What do I know about a rectangle? It has to have 90 degrees. So some things we know about rectangles, again, this is good for everybody, even though this might not be a question you see on a test. It has to have 4 90-degree angles. And it has to have 2 sets of equal sides. Well, if this side is going to be equal, then the dot has to be directly, oops, I'm in eraser mode. The dot has to be directly above this one and directly across from this one. Again, if you don't draw it accurately, you're going to get the wrong answer. So I draw it, but then I conceptually think about it too. This dot was at 6, 2. So I need another dot at 6, something, because I need to go over 6, and I either need to go down or up on that 6 line. So I know that my X value has to be 6, something. Well, where am I going? How far up am I going? I'm going up as far as we went up for this dot. How far did I go up for that dot? I went up 5. So this dot needs to go up 5 so that it's directly across from it. So my other XY coordinate is going to be 6, 5. So you can definitely solve this problem like using a graph, or you can definitely solve this problem using algebra. As I'm solving these problems, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have as I'm solving these problems if you drop them in the chat. So don't hesitate to ask. Also, if you're not seeing exactly what you want me to solve, you're like, man, I'm really studying for my exam and I know that my weakest area is coordinate geometry. Or I'm studying for my exam and I know that my weakest section is data and statistics. Let me know in the comments as well. That helps me build the problems for the following weeks. All right, next problem. Another coordinate plane problem, because this is something I've noticed that people often will ask me questions about. Suppose 2 coordinates, D and F, lie on the XY plane. So I know that I've got a coordinate plane and I've got D and F. I don't know that that's where they're at, but that's just what I'm thinking about right now as I'm reading this problem. If the coordinates of D and F are -5, 8 and 3 comma negative 2 respectively. What is the distance between them? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So let's go ahead and graph those. Negative 5, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Woo! Almost out of room. So negative 5, 8 is going to be here. And that's going to be D. And 3, negative 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. F is going to be here. Ironically, I almost drew that first set of dots in the right place. And then I'm going to connect them. And it wants to know the distance between them. So the quickest way to do this is going to be to use the distance formula. I'm going to do it the quickest way, and then I'm going to show you how to do it the not quick way. Here we go. So the distance formula says, distance formula, the square root of x minus x squared plus y minus y squared. So I'm going to take my 2 x's and my 2 y's from my 2 coordinate points. I'm going to subtract them, and I'm going to square them. So I'm going to take my x and my x, the square root of negative 5 minus 3 squared. Then I'm going to take my y's. Because I did the negative 5 first, I'm going to do the 8 next. Or I'm going to do the 8 first with the y's. So 8 minus negative 2 squared. You're asking why I got a plus sign? Because when I subtract a negative times a negative makes a positive. So it became an addition sign. I'm going to square root. Negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8 squared. If you're not sure where I'm getting these numbers, please ask. Plus 8 plus 2 is 10 squared. Negative 8 squared is 64 because negative 8 times negative 8 is positive 64. 10 squared is 100. So the square root of 164. And when I plug that into my calculator, I get 12.81. Now, if you don't remember the distance formula, you can also always use, yes, Stephanie, the Pythagorean theorem. We can create a triangle out of this line, which is so cool. So I'm going to draw a vertical line straight up from the F until it meets with D. Then I'm going to draw a straight line from D until it meets with F, and I'm going to create a 90-degree angle. Now that I have a right triangle, now this, if you already know the distance formula, not going to use this way. If you don't remember the distance formula, or this way makes a little bit more sense, this is just another way to solve the problem. So the Pythagorean theorem says I can do, so Pythagorean, I always spell it wrong, theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This only works with right triangles, but we created a right triangle. And what this is it allows us to find the length of the sides of a triangle, where this is always your hypotenuse, which is across from the 90-degree angle. That's the black line that we're looking for. Well, what is the distance from here to here? How long is that? Well, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or I can subtract the distance there. Then what is the distance across? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, I can count if I can draw accurately, or I can subtract. Now I've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Wait a minute. Does something look familiar? This is this step right here. All they did was they subtracted the distance here to find the 8. They subtracted the distance here to find the 10. And now they're going to add them. 100 plus 64 equals c squared. 164 equals c squared. Square root both sides. Get the same answer. So whichever way makes more sense to you is the way that you can solve this. This is definitely going to be found on a 5 through 9 or 6 through 12, 7 through 12 exam. However, look at your blueprint and see if it's on your core or your GK math to see if distance formula is specifically on there. We're going to do another problem very similar to that, but we're going to include the midpoint this time. Yes, Stephanie, when I realized that, it was life-changing. And it took me until about a year ago to realize that. So, very similar problem, except we're throwing in the midpoint. Suppose two coordinates, D and F, lie on the XY plane. What are we going to do? You should automatically already be drawing your coordinate plane, where T is the midpoint of the line segment DF. So now that I have my DF, I have a T in the middle. These points are different than the other problem because I wanted to give us time to practice what we just learned. But what they're saying is that T is dead center in the middle of the line. So let's go ahead and graph D and F. 4, -7. 1, 2, 3, 4. -7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 6, -1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, -1. So here's D and F. And it says T is in the middle. Now, I am not just going to eyeball this and put a T right here because I think that's the middle. There is a very specific formula for this, and we're going to talk about that after we talk about this problem. If I wanted to travel from D to F and back to T, how far will I travel? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So how am I going to find the distance from D to F? Distance formula or Pythagorean theorem. Either way works. If you want to use Pythagorean theorem, you're going to create that triangle here. I'm going to do the distance formula because that's just the easier way for me. So I'm going to do the square root of x minus x plus y minus y. So I'm going to do the square root of 4 minus 6 squared plus -7 minus -1 squared. So 4 minus 6 is the square root of -2 squared plus -6 squared. -2 squared is 4. -6 squared is 36, so this equals the square root of 40. What does that represent? The square root of 40 is the distance from D to F. Now, yes, I'm absolutely going to cut that in half. However, do not cut the 40 in half. The square root plays with that 40 and that will not work. I'm going to take the square root of 40, which is the distance between D and F, and add that to the square root of 40 divided by 2, which is going to give me the half measurement of D and F. But the square root of 40 divided by 2 is not the same as the square root of 20. Keep that in mind. So I'm just going to plug this in my calculator. The square root of 40 is 6.32. And then divide that value by 2. Cut it in half. 3.16. Add those together and we get 9.49, which is C. Now I want you to watch something. If I do the square root of 40, we get 6.32. If I do the square root, and then if I divide that by 2, I get 3.16. If I do the square root of 20, I get 4.47. They are not the same because square roots act differently. They are square measurements, not linear measurements. So that's how we do it. Now, for those of you who are dying to know the midpoint formula or how to find even where T is, midpoint formula says that I can add my x's together and divide it by 2 and add my y's and divide it by 2. So if I add my 4 and my 6, 4 plus 6 divided by 2, and then negative 7 plus negative 1 divided by 2, T is going to be at 5, comma, negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. T is going to be right there. And then if this confused you, the dividing by 2, you could find the distance between D and T now that you have another point. I don't know if I would do that because that's a whole nother use of the distance formula, and the distance formula is not the easiest to use. It's just kind of cumbersome. So I would just divide my value by 2. But if that makes more sense to you, absolutely do it. All right, let's keep going. A little data graph. So this is going to be seen by everybody, pre-K through 12. This graph would be perfect for a pre-K through 3 or K through 6 kind of problem. However, my GK, Praxis Core, 5 through 9, 6 through 12 people, you got to know how to interpret graphs. So it's important for everybody. The graph to the right shows the temperature of an area over the course of time. At what time was temperature the highest? At what time was temperature the highest? So in order to be able to solve this, we have to be able to analyze what the graph is saying and how it's saying it. So my x-axis, because really this can be turned into a coordinate grid, my x-axis is time, and my y-axis is temperature. So when they're asking us at what time was the temperature the highest, I have to find where is the temperature the highest and then look at what time that is. So where on this graph is my temperature going to be the highest? Highest obviously is going to mean furthest up the y-axis. So it is highest right here. That's where the temperature is the highest because that's where my y value is at the top. And what temperature is that? It's about 32.25 degrees Celsius. What time did that happen? That happened at 1:30. So my answer is going to be B. Pretty straightforward. However, if we don't know how to read a graph, not straightforward at all. Let's look at this same graph, different question. The graph to the right shows the temperature of an area over the course of time. Same graph, different question. What is the range in temperatures from 8:30 to 11? So measures of central tendency. Measures of central tendency are mean, median, and mode. However, you will also often see range lumped in with those, and it's just a way to interpret our data. So this is a graph question, but falls right into that data statistics and probability section of most of your exams, where we're finding mean, median, and mode, or range. Mean, median, and mode basically show us where the middle-ish of the graph is, depending on what our outliers are. Mean is the average, median is the middle, and mode is the thing that occurs the most. The range is going to be your difference, or the range of values from start to finish. So the range is the difference between your highest and your lowest, is usually what we think of range as. Normally we hear range and we think subtract the highest and the lowest. However, that's where this question trips people up, because it doesn't ask for the range of the entire data set. If it asked for the range of the entire data set, we would take the highest and we would take the lowest and we would subtract them. But that's not what they asked us for. They asked us for the range between 8:30 and 11. So I'm only looking between here and here. So I'm looking for the difference between this value and this value. Do I remember your mean, median, and mode song? I remember you sharing it with me. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I remember you sharing it with me and thinking it was really awesome. So if I'm looking for the range, I'm looking for the difference. So I have to know what these values are approximately. So let's go ahead and erase this so we can see our values. This dot is going to be just under the 30, between the 29.5 and the 30. So we're going to call that 29.8. Does this have to be exact? No, because when I look at my answer choices, they're exact, but they're far enough apart from one another that you're going to be able to figure out what that value is. Then at 11 o'clock, I've got this dot. This dot is between the 31 and the 31.5, pretty much right in the middle. So we're going to call that 31.25, because 0.25 is between 0.0 and 0.5. I like to think of decimals as money sometimes in the quarter. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract those values. 31.25 minus 29.8. I'm going to use my calculator just for mere, don't want to make a mistake right now. Minus 29.8, but not everybody will have a calculator. So you need to understand how to subtract and add decimals. 1.45. Now, did I get the exact answer that they got? No. However, that's because everybody was estimating these dots just slightly different, and that's okay. What we don't want is for us to overestimate by a ton or underestimate by a ton and then get a weird, wacko answer. So as long as you're estimating close and you know that that's why your answer is off, that's why our answer was just 1/10 of a point off here in this problem. Stephanie just shared an awesome mean, median, and mode song in the comments. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and look, because it might help you remember how to differentiate between mean, median, and mode. Also, if you're in any of my courses, I often talk about mean, median, and mode in my courses, and I use analogies there too. All right, let's keep going with our problems. Number 6. Below is an example of a student's work. 3/12 minus 2/6 equals 1/6. 5/13 plus 1/2 equals 6/15. 7/8 minus 4/5 equals 1. If the student continues making the same error, The student's most likely answer to the problem, 11/15 minus 3/5 would be what? So we know this student is making an error because the problem is telling us if this student continues to make the same error. So what we have to do is find what this student's error is. So let's look at the first one. 3/12 minus 2/6 equals 1/6. When we add and subtract fractions, what do we know that we should do? We should be getting common denominators. So we should be multiplying this by a value of 2/2, which equals 1. So 3/12 equals, 3/12 minus 4/12 equals -1/12. That should be how we are solving the problem, but the student did not solve the problem that way because they got an answer of 1/6. So what can you identify as what they did? How did they get 1 on the top? They just subtracted 3 minus 2. How did they get 6 on the bottom? They just subtracted 12 minus 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. 12 minus 6 is 6. Let's see if they made that same error for the next problem. 5/13 plus 1/2 equals 6/15. 5 plus 1 is 6. 13 plus 2 is 15. So it looks like they don't understand how to add and subtract fractions. This student is just adding or subtracting the numerators and the denominators. Let's look at the third one to make sure that that's the error they're making. 7/8 minus 4/5 equals 1. Wait a minute. How did they get 1? Well, 7 minus 4 equals 3. 8 minus 5 equals 3. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now, again, I'm not saying this is how you should solve it. It's absolutely not how you should solve it. However, we had to identify this student's error before we could solve this problem using that student's error. So let's go ahead and solve this problem not the correct way. Because in fact, if we solve it the correct way, the answer is actually in this answer choice. And that's going to be the wrong answer because we're supposed to be finding how this student would answer the question. So 11 divided by 15 minus 3 divided by 5 equals 11 minus 3 is 8. Oops. 15 minus 5 is 10. So the answer that this student would most likely come up with is C, which is why C is the correct answer for this problem. However, if you just solved this problem the way it was supposed to be solved, multiply the top by 3 and the bottom by 3, we would get 11 divided by 15 minus 9 divided by 15. 11 minus 9 is 2/15. Would you look at that? That's one of the answer choices. And that's the correct answer to that subtraction problem, but that's not what the problem asked us. And that's 95% of taking an exam is figuring out what that problem is asking of us. All right, let's keep going. A specialty soap company sells vanilla soap for $3.95 per ounce and lavender soap for $5.95 per ounce. How many ounces of lavender soap should be mixed with 3 ounces of vanilla soap in order to create a mixture that sells for $4.75 per ounce? There's 2 different ways we can solve this. The first way we can solve this is extremely algebraic. We can use a system of equations except they don't give us all the information we need for it, so it would be very difficult and cumbersome to solve it that way. In this case, I would actually just use my answer choices to figure this out. So if it's asking how many ounces of lavender soap should be mixed, so I know that I've got lavender soap plus vanilla soap, and I want it to equal $4.75 per ounce. Well, if I know I'm doing 3 ounces of vanilla soap, I can figure out the cost of all of that. So 3 vanilla times $3.95 is going to equal $11.85. And so far I have 3 ounces. And it wants to know how many ounces of lavender should we do? Well, let's just try one. Let's just start using our answer choices to try it. So if I add this to 1 ounce of $5.95, that's going to equal $5.95. If I add those together, I get $17.80. But if we're trying to find out a mixture per ounce, I have 3 ounces of vanilla and 1 ounce of lavender, so I have a total of 4 ounces. In order to figure out how much this is going to cost per ounce, I'm just going to divide this by 4, and I get $4.45 per ounce. That's not correct, so A is wrong. I'm going to do that same process for letter B. Switch colors. I already know that the 3 vanilla is $11.85, so I don't need to figure that out. $11.85 plus 2 times $5.95 this time, instead of 1. 2 times $5.95 equals $11.90. Add that to $11.85, and I'm going to be paying $23.75. But this time, I'm not doing 4 ounces, it's 5 ounces, because I have 3 ounces of vanilla and 2 ounces of lavender. So if I divide this by 5, I get $4.75. B. Yes, I could have used a system of equations again, but normally when we use a system of equations, we have totals, and in this case, they did not give us totals, so the system would actually kind of flop. You could set it up with an equation, but again, I did it with an equation earlier, and it's just so cumbersome, I'm not even going to show you, because normally I'll show you both ways, but it was so obnoxiously cumbersome, it's not even worth it. Like, don't even do it like that. If there were totals, like, you know, how many, like, they have a goal of having 8 ounces and they have a goal of spending so much money, then you could set up a pretty easy system. But in this case, they didn't give us all that information. So using your answer choices is going to be the best option. Alex is purchasing a fish tank from the local pet store. He purchased the fish tank shown below. Fish tank. If the fish he wishes to purchase needs 14 gallons of water per fish, what is the maximum number of fish Alex can purchase? 1 cubic foot is approximately 7.48 gallons. So they've told us the number of gallons that equals a cubic foot. Cubic is volume. So I need to find the volume of this container in cubic feet. But they gave us the container in inches. So I need to convert it on the front end. Can I convert it on the back end? Yes. but you have to remember you're converting cubic inches into linear, like into feet, and it gets messy. So I always like to convert on the front end. So I'm just going to divide each of these numbers by 12 because there are 12 inches in 1 foot. So if I divide them all by 12, I can figure out the linear measurement that each of these is in feet. So this equals 1.75 feet. This equals 6 feet. And this equals 1.5. No. Yes, 1.5 feet. Now, to find the volume of this fish tank, I'm going to do 1.75 times 6 times 1.5. Because we know volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height, because volume of a prism is area of the base times the height, and the base is just a rectangle, which is just length times width. So volume is length times width times height. So when I multiply all of those together, I get 15.75 feet cubed. What am I going to do with that number? That number tells us how many cubic feet are in that fish tank. But we need to know how many fish he can purchase. But if each fish needs 14 gallons of water, we need to figure out how many gallons are in this tank. But they told us 1 foot is 7.48 gallons. So if I multiply this by 7.48, because these are cubic feet, it'll tell me how many gallons my tank is, which is 117.81 gallons. Now, what am I going to do with that? Now I'm going to divide that number by 14, because if I divide my total gallons by 14, it'll show me how many fish can go in there, because each fish needs 14 gallons of water. So if I do 117.81 divided by 14, it'll tell me how many fish can fit in there. So divided by 14, I get 8.415. How many fish can he purchase? It's just going to be 8, because even though it says 8.41, I don't have enough water for that 9th fish. Even if it was 8.9, I would not round up, because I would not have enough water for that 9th fish. So when we are looking at rounding, we also have to keep in mind the context of the problem. In this case, it's 8 fish. And that is all that we have time for today. I am so thankful that you guys all joined me. If you have any questions about what I did, please drop them in the comments. Or if there's anything that you want to see me solve in the upcoming weeks, please feel free to drop a comment and let me know, so that I can kind of tailor some of our problems to what you need, because this is for you, not for me. So I like to make sure I'm tailoring the problems to benefit you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. A, and I will see you all next week. It was great to see you, and I hope that you have an amazing week and weekend.
All right, so wasn't that an amazing session? Now, I know, depending on what exam you have to take, you're like, man, that was great, but she didn't address everything I needed. She focused on all different questions, and I just need elementary, or I just need middle school, I just need high school. Don't worry. Since you're still with us, I've got a special surprise for you. If you the coupon code, all capital letters, SINK35, that's SINK 35, that will take off 35% off any of our prep courses on our website at the Learning Liaisons. Doesn't have to just be math. It could be anything that you need that we offer. And this is going to be an ongoing deal for you guys who attend these live sessions, because these are great I'm sure Amy opened your eyes to some new concepts, some new ways to tackle problems, building that confidence. But this is just a smidget of your exam, the concepts on your test. So if you want the comprehensive view with the practice with Amy, with the practice test, with the lessons and the content review, we've got your back on our video boot camps, which all of them feature Amy Sink, your math specialist. So if you want to take advantage of that, the code is SYNC35. You can use that at checkout on the learningliaisons.com website. And all that information is on our website as well, and on the bottom of the screen in this video. So we are here to help you. Once again, always remember, it's when you pass, not if you pass. Thank you for joining us again today, and hopefully we'll see you next week too. Talk to you soon.